Ladies and gentlemen, the Champions League round of 16 draw has been officially decided. We do know who will be playing each other in the next round. And in fact, we have a pretty good idea of what the quarterfinals and even semifinals could look like as well too. The bracket is decided. Let's go through some of these. We start off with maybe the most blockbuster tie of the entire round of 16, and that's Liverpool, who of course topped the original Champions League table, against PSG, who had a few slip-ups in the Champions League initial round, but as the season has gone by, they have grown in confidence, grown in form, grown in stature, and at the moment are one of the form teams in all of Europe. Don't believe me? Well, in the league, they are still the only team in the top 5 leagues in Europe to still be undefeated. And we're in February. We're nearly in March. They have not lost a game domestically. And since November, they've scored 60 goals and only lost 2 games in all competitions. So, on paper, I think Liverpool are rightfully the favorites because all season long, I just think they've been a really, really top team. They've really impressed me. And although they are kind of in the midst of a little blip at the moment, both in terms of form, in terms of performances, it is a little shaky at the moment for Liverpool. They do go into this game as the favorites. And look, I think this one is really tough to predict. And I think Liverpool fans will be really annoyed about how this draw went because when you win your entire Champions League table, you kind of expect to be rewarded with an easy-ish fixture, right? And although I don't want to kind of disrespect any of the teams that are in this competition, right? At this point, no game is easy, but PSG is hardly the tie you would kind of expect, but that's just kind of how it went down here. Now, PSG, right, in the Champions League this year against the bigger sides haven't been the most convincing. Of course, they lost to Arsenal, they lost to Atletico Madrid, they lost to Bayern Munich, but as I said, as the season has gone by, I think they've started to learn a little bit more about themselves, and I think they're a lot more, I think at this point in the season now, PSG are more comfortable with who they are than they were 3 months ago, especially with the acquisition of Kvaratskhelia, and of course, especially with the uptick in form from a certain Ousmane Dembele, who since 2025 kicked off is one of the form players in world football. My one worry for PSG here is the physicality aspect of things, because when I look at Liverpool's midfield in particular, you have Ryan Gravenberch, you have McAllister, you have Szoboszlai. Now, I love the midfield that PSG put out, whether that's Vitinha and João Neves playing deeper, or whether you put Fabian Ruiz in front of them, or you even play Desiree Doué, who's kind of been operating as a 10 in recent games. I love that midfield, but I think there is the small fear that against that kind of midfield that contains the likes of Gravenberch, Szoboszlai, McAllister, is there a chance that they get outrun? Is there a chance that they get outfought? I personally thought against Arsenal earlier in the season, I did feel like that midfield that Arsenal put up against them with Declan Rice, with Thomas Partey, the sheer physicality of that midfield did kind of leave them drowning at times. Do I expect the same thing to happen here? No, I think they'll be a little better equipped, and I think they'll be a little more aware of the task at hand. But that is a small question mark. However, on the other side, I think PSG, with their threat out wide in the form of Kvaratskhelia, Barcola, on the other side, Doué if he's playing there, Ousmane Dembele, of course, can drift on either side. And PSG in particular, they're one of those teams in Europe that over the course of a 90-minute game, their wingers will literally interchange. Whoever's on the right will play on the left. Whoever's on the left will go drift out on the right. They're one of the few teams in Europe that actually do that. And when I look at Liverpool, their problem at the moment, or one of their problems, I would say, is defending in wide areas. I think Robertson is clearly not the defender he used to be, especially 1v1. And in Trent, we do know the qualities he possesses on the ball. And although I do think he's improved as a 1v1 defender, I think he's still suspect to those lapses in concentration, to those moments of uncertainty when defending against really top level 1v1 dribblers out wide. And in PSG, you have numerous players that can kind of do that role. Now, at the end of the day, I think Liverpool have the match winners in the form of Mohamed Salah, who is maybe the best player in the world on form this season. Virgil van Dijk, one of the maybe the best center back in the world. Trent, who can pick out a pass from anywhere on the pitch. They have top level players that could decide a game just like that. But a worry I do have is just the timing of this fixture. I think throughout the year, I would have definitely had Liverpool progressing. But I think with the form that both teams kind of enter this game in, there's a small part of me, guys, that genuinely thinks PSG could do it. And I don't think that's me being disrespectful to Liverpool. Again, do I think Liverpool's the better team? Yes. But the form going into this fixture for both teams does slightly worry me. Now, what goes in Liverpool's favor is the fact that they play at Anfield in the second leg. And that's almost enough for me to almost say I think they should have enough, because although going to the Parc des Princes is obviously very, very difficult, PSG's home support is tremendous. Going away to Anfield, having to defend the lead, or Liverpool, kind of like going to that cauldron on a European night is never easy. We've seen so many teams kind of sink under that kind of pressure, and that's almost enough for me to say I think Liverpool will just have enough. But guys, I'm not 100% confident about this one. I do think PSG have what it takes to kind of upset a big team like this. Like, this is the one team I think coming out of the playoffs, maybe not the one team because Madrid is also coming out of it, but this is a team that no one would have wanted to play because the form that they're in and the confidence that they're playing with at the moment, they're a problem for anybody. They just got finished putting 10 past Brest, and I know Brest is not Liverpool, but that's the kind of firepower PSG kind of have up front. I think maybe it's, I don't want to say big team bias because PSG is a big team in their own right, but maybe because of what I've seen from Liverpool all year, I'm still going to favor them, especially because the second leg's at Anfield. But this is a really tough tie to predict. I'm going to edge it to Liverpool, but guys, do not be shocked if PSG are the team playing in the quarterfinal when it's all said and done. Next up, the winner of PSG versus Liverpool will actually be playing the winner of Club Brugge versus Aston Villa. And Club Brugge have just managed to shock everybody. This is a team that's not even first in their own division. They're not even first in their own league. And they came 24th in the Champions League table, barely qualified on the last day. They were drawn against Atalanta, which on paper was a very difficult tie. Atalanta have been so good domestically, and they had some big results in the Champions League as well too, but they shocked Atalanta, winning both at home and away. And they did it in style as well too. It wasn't like a snatch and grab. I think they were convincingly the better winner against Atalanta. And I know Atalanta had their own issues in the space of that game. Obviously, the aftermath between Gasperini and Lookman is the biggest takeaway. But Club Brugge, do not underestimate them. And in fact, in Aston Villa, it's a team that they've already beaten in the Champions League, albeit dubiously, for sure. It wasn't a very convincing win. And I think Aston Villa fans will definitely argue that maybe they were kind of hard done by with the refereeing decision, but they've already beaten Villa this year, and I think that counts for something. I think when you're entering a game like that, you already have a little bit of a mental advantage, or at least you know how they kind of play. Whereas Villa have just been a team that have been so impressive for me in the Champions League this year. They've had big wins, they've played big teams, they've been convincing in my opinion in some of those games. In the league, they've been a little less consistent, and I think that was always going to come when juggling Champions League with the league, and they're still in the FA Cup. But Unai Emery, I think this is a guy that in Europe just knows how to go far with underdogs. We saw it with Villarreal, we saw it with Sevilla so many times in the Champions League, and I predicted Villa a few months ago would be a team that could potentially go to the quarterfinals. I truly believe that they have that in their locker, and I think they will. I think they've made some really interesting acquisitions in January as well too, adding players like Marcus Rashford, adding players like Marco Asensio, adding players like Axel Disasi, Daniel Malin. I don't think they can register all of them, but even if they register 3 of them, those are players that increase the level of Aston Villa. I think going from Leon Bailey and Philogene, no disrespect to either of them, to now Rashford and Asensio on either side makes Villa that much scarier of a team. And I think they will have too much for Club Brugge. Big respect to them for even getting this far in the competition. But I think Villa will be playing in the Champions League quarterfinal. And for a team that when Unai Emery took them over were languishing in relegation, that's just a tremendous 18 to 24 months that the team has gone under. So I got Villa playing the winner of PSG and Liverpool. Now, as the names kind of list off, right, as we rack off the names, this side of the bracket is really difficult because this is, again, another blockbuster fixture. Real Madrid versus Atletico Madrid. Now, Real obviously had that tie against Manchester City, a depleted Man City that have just not been up to the races this year. And in my opinion, there was only ever going to be one winner. And that winner is the one that is sitting in front of us, Real Madrid. The team that, look, they just always seem to kind of click at the right point in seasons. Obviously, we know the struggles they faced earlier in the year. That's the reason they were even in the playoffs, because I think they were slowly but surely building momentum, figuring it all out, kind of learning how to live life without Toni Kroos, Kylian Mbappe meshing into the team, finding himself in the side. And like I said, a difficult first 4 months maybe, but at this point in the season, February, March time, it looks like a team that is really clicking in the first gear. Defensively against Man City for me, and in general, I think that was the best performance from Real Madrid I saw all season. And again, I know it was against an undermanned, depleted Manchester City team that have just not been up to it all year long, but give credit to Real Madrid. I thought that was their most convincing game of the entire season. And it was the most, for me, convincing game from a certain Kylian Mbappe, who I was very critical of the first 4 months of the season. I felt like he had almost lost a step. I felt like he was playing completely without confidence, completely without the swagger that we know and love about Kylian Mbappe. But it's been getting better week in, week out in La Liga. And I think in the Champions League, that was the game that if anybody needed convincing that Kylian Mbappe looks back, I think that game would have done massive, massive favors for his confidence and for his form. They play against Atletico Madrid. Now, Atletico Madrid in the Champions League over the last 10-15 years have been very, very good until they tend to play Real Madrid. Now, I know the last few years they have gone out to other teams, Leipzig, for example, last year against Dortmund, but for the most part, Diego Simeone's side is a real dark horse in this competition, and it almost always feels that if anyone's going to knock them out, it has to be Real Madrid. Now, in La Liga and in the Copa del Rey, the form between both sides when they face off has been pretty even. And in fact, if I look at their form in the last few meetings, 1-1 draw in La Liga, 1-1 draw in La Liga, 1-1 draw in La Liga. That's the three last fixtures between these two teams. Then you go further back, round of 16 in the Copa del Rey, when Real Madrid were they were trying to go for a treble. Atletico Madrid knocked them out. Then we go before that, Super Cup, Real Madrid beat them 5-3 after extra time. Then you go after that, Atletico beats them 3-1. Then before that, Real Madrid draws 1-1. Then before that, Copa del Rey, Real knocks them out 3-1. So it's a fixture over the last few years that has really kind of been pretty well balanced. I think Atletico Madrid are a team that we all know can cause Real Madrid problems. Diego Simeone seems to be able to kind of get under Ancelotti's skin. He seems to kind of be able to make it frustrating against this Real Madrid team. Now, like I said, in the Champions League, it has been a little different. Even in seasons where Atletico Madrid win the league or they have their number in La Liga, in the Champions League, it just seems to be a little different. Whether it's the 2014 Champions League final, the 2015 quarterfinals, the 2016 final. Real Madrid entered all of those games, not underdogs, but like weary of the threat that Atletico kind of posed, and in all three of those games broke Atletico Madrid's heart in like devastating fashion, and like the most heartbreaking fashion. Last minute winners, penalty shootouts. They just seem to have Atletico Madrid's number in Europe. And I know these are fixtures that happened damn near 10 years ago, but I always feel like heritage still has a little part to play in this competition. I think Atletico Madrid will make it very, very difficult for Real, but I just love the way Real are kind of growing into the season. And at this point in the campaign, I think they look like one of the scariest teams on the planet, and I think they will have too much to play against Atletico Madrid. Now, waiting for them will be the winner of PSV versus Arsenal. And now, I know Arsenal fans right now are absolutely devastated with how this draw went, because it was either Feyenoord or it was either PSV. It was one of the two Dutch teams. But if they had drawn Feyenoord, they would have gone to the other side of the bracket, where I think, as we'll go on to see, it is a little bit more favorable. But they face off against PSV, who of course took care of business against Juventus. Now, Juve are a team that have just completely been, for me, they're one of the biggest disappointments this year. They were a team that I entered the season almost really excited to kind of see. They seem so unpredictable and new and fresh and young, but they've just been a massive bottle job, both domestically and in the Champions League. But give credit to PSV, who took care of business. Now, in the league for PSV, they have kind of fallen off a little bit in the last few weeks. Ajax have reclaimed the number one spot, but they're still a team, PSV, that know how to cause an upset, as we just saw against Juve. This is actually the third year in a row, I think, that they play Arsenal, as they've played in the Europa League, they've played in the Champions League last season, and I think they drew against Arsenal last season in Eindhoven, but for the most part, I think Arsenal have kind of had their number. And I have to be honest here, guys, not to disrespect PSV, but I think Arsenal will have too much for them, right? I think Arsenal are the better team than PSV. I think they're better coached. I think they're better men, even with all the injuries. And I think they will qualify to the next round. But when you look at what's waiting for them, either a trip to the Wanda Metropolitano or the Santiago Bernabeu, those are really, really tough fixtures for Arsenal. And we'll go into the semifinals and the quarterfinals in a bit, but I don't see Arsenal beating either of those two teams. I think that's a really, really tough fixture for Arsenal. But we go into the other side of the bracket with Benfica against Barca. And I feel like we just got finished seeing these teams play like a week ago. Obviously, it was more like a month, but Benfica and Barcelona conjured up what is potentially the game of the entire year between the two sides. That game, of course, finished 5-4 to Barcelona, but wow, the scores just seemed to interchange between both sides. 1 minute Barca were leading. The next minute Benfica had a lead that you didn't think they could drop off. And then in the last minute, should Benfica have had a penalty, they didn't get it. Rafinha goes up the other end. He grabs his goal. Barca finish out 5-4 winners. And Barcelona are the team that have scored the most goals in the Champions League, or at least they did before the knockouts. I don't know if before the playoffs. I don't know if anything changed from that, but they were the competition's top scorers. But defensively, they also conceded as many goals in the Champions League group as Celtic. So Barca, we know all season, have been a team that their mentality is: you score 4, we score 5. You score 5, we score 6. You score 6. You get the gist. That's just Hansi Flick ball, to be fair. But this year they have been that team that are extremely attack-minded, but defensively, they are kind of susceptible to conceding a goal or two. Now, Benfica, they entered the playoffs and played Monaco, who Monaco were really impressive for me. They've been one of my favorite teams to watch in the Champions League, and the way they went out, I feel for them. But Benfica, first of all, have heritage in this competition as well, too. I think they're always good for an upset. And they have one of the, I would say, dark horses of the entire competition in Pavlidis, who I don't know if many people would have known about him before the season, but I think he's really taken the competition by storm. If I go into the Champions League top scorers right now, he currently sits on 7. And yes, I know that's heavily padded by his hat-trick against Barca, and then he scored a few in both legs against Monaco, but he's one of the top scorers in the competition, so I think he definitely deserves his flowers, his credits. And I always feel like with Benfica, they are the masters of kind of just generating new center forwards to go play up top, whether it's Darwin Nunez, whether it was Joao Felix a few years ago. Now it seems to be Pavlidis. They seem to just find, or Gonzalo Ramos even, they just seem to find a guy up front to pad goals, and then they'll go ship him off for 60, 70 million. Let's see if Pavlidis is the next one up. But Barca, this is again a fixture where I think they're going to have too much for Benfica. I think Barcelona have been absolutely irresistible from a goal scoring point of view. And although I think there are teams coming up that maybe might pose them a bit of a problem, I still think against Benfica, they have far too much firepower for them. So I think Barcelona will be the first team to make it to the quarterfinals. And guys, honestly, when I look at this entire draw, right, no game is easy for sure. But surely Barcelona have to consider themselves the biggest winner of this entire draw. Liverpool and PSG, neither side will be happy about that. Real Madrid playing Atletico, that's not an easy fixture for either side. I know Arsenal are probably kicking themselves that they're on the same fixture, the same side as all these teams. Inter and Bayern, they look like they might be posed for a meeting between the two of them. Leverkusen as well too. And now Barcelona, if they beat Benfica, which I think they're favorites for, will play against Dortmund or Lille. And again, both these sides, Dortmund have been such a weird team to predict this year because they currently sit 11th in the Bundesliga. They've been really, really inconsistent. They just got finished firing Nuri Sahin. Niko Kovac is in the door. Yes, they beat Sporting, but we know Sporting, ever since Ruben Amorim left the club, have been an absolute shambles. And they now play against Lille, who were probably the biggest shock of the entire Champions League table, because this is a team that beat Real Madrid. This is a team that beat Atletico Madrid. I want to say, did they beat Juve as well too? They had a big result. Maybe it was Liverpool. I can't remember who exactly it was, but Lille were kind of a giant killer in the Champions League table. So they are fully deserving to be here. And I think they look at Borussia Dortmund, and yeah, in terms of club stature, Dortmund are the favorites on paper. But I have to be honest with you guys, I think I fancy Lille. I think I do. Now, Lille sit 5th in Ligue 1, so their domestic form hasn't been the best. But I just look at this Dortmund team, and for me, there's too many unpredictable factors with them. They are just way too Jekyll and Hyde for me. And although they do have the top scorer in this competition this season in Serhou Guirassy, and for me, Jamie Bino Gittins has kind of been one of the emerging stars in the Champions League this year, I'm gonna shock you guys maybe and say I think Lille actually progress out of this tie, and I think they will face Barcelona in the quarterfinals. Now, also on this side of the bracket, you have an all-German affair, and you have Feyenoord returning to the San Siro. Now, let's start with Bayern Munich versus Bayer Leverkusen. This is, again, a really, really interesting tie for me. Now, in my opinion, there's 3 ties I'm really looking forward to seeing. That's PSG Liverpool, that's Real Madrid Atletico Madrid, and that's Bayern Munich versus Leverkusen. Now, if we look at the last few games between Bayer Leverkusen and Bayern Munich, ladies and gentlemen, Bayern Munich have not beaten Leverkusen since September 2022. That's almost 3 years ago. Leverkusen have just had these guys' number. And when you look at the fixtures this year, obviously they knocked them actually out of the German Cup, Leverkusen did, beating them 1-0. Both results in the league have been draws. Last year, we know Leverkusen on their crazy invincible run smashed Thomas Tuchel's men 3-0, drew to them at the Allianz. This is a team that, let's be real, Xabi Alonso knows how to set up against these guys. It isn't always pretty. I remember the home fixture, especially this season in the league. Leverkusen really came for a draw, and they got exactly what they wanted. And in my opinion, Bayern Munich, I know their fans are not going to want to hear me say this, but this is just the way I feel, are the most unconvincing elite team in the Champions League this year. They are the team for me that I feel the least good about out of all the self-proclaimed elite sides. Vincent Kompany, he has not impressed me in any way, shape, or form this year. I know he entered the campaign in red-hot form, beating Dinamo Zagreb 9-2, and I think a lot of people got really excited off the back of that result, but I came out of it thinking, look, for as long as I've been watching football, Bayern Munich always beat up on these minnows in the Champions League. I've seen it so many times. That doesn't really tell me anything about Bayern. It doesn't really tell me anything about Vincent Kompany. I'm going to keep an eye out for him against the elite teams, against the elite men, or who I consider the elite managers. And so this year for Bayern, I've watched them against Leverkusen because I consider Xabi Alonso one of the best in Europe. I watched them against Villa, because I consider Unai Emery one of the best tacticians in Europe. And I watched them against Barca because I rate Hansi Flick extremely highly. And in all three of those games, right, he drew one. No, I watched him twice against Leverkusen. I watched, the DFB Pokal, and I watched as well, too, the home leg. And I watched them against Aston Villa, and I watched them against Barcelona. And in all of those games, guys, honestly, I came out of it just feeling extremely underwhelmed. Now, some Bayern fans will say in those games, Bayern dominated possession. They definitely did against Aston Villa in terms of possession point of view. And against Leverkusen, I would have to say only one team really came to win, and that was Bayern. But against Leverkusen, again, I think Alonso came for a draw, and he got exactly what he wanted. And I don't think Bayern at any point really did that much to disrupt them. I thought Leverkusen were very comfortable in their approach to the game. They came for a draw, and at no point did I ever think they weren't going to get it. Against Villa, obviously Bayern Munich come to win, but it's just so much back and forth, sideways, backwards passing. It's a very slow, methodical way of playing. Very, in fact, un-Bayern-like. I would even say Guardiola's sides were much more attack-minded. This company team, you know the way they want to play. It's a very heavy possession style of play. But in my opinion, it doesn't really match what I think Bayern Munich should be playing like, especially with the players at their disposal. And I think it makes them extremely lethargic and extremely easy to play against because they're very predictable. They're very slow, and they're very, very methodical in the way they play. But again, against Aston Villa, for most of the game, I think they had one shot on target the entire game until the last extra injury time where they were really pushing for a winner because of John Duran's goal. And then against Barca, I thought Barca just picked them apart. Yes, Bayern had some good play in that game. But again, I think Hansi Flick ultimately outcoached Vincent Kompany. And that's my biggest fear for Bayern this year. Do they have very talented players? Of course they do. Jamal Musiala, Olise, Kimmich, Pavlovic, Harry Kane is still one of the best goal scorers in Europe. But do I think Vincent Kompany in these knockout games against who I consider to be Europe's elite tacticians has enough in the tank, enough tactical nous to really beat them over two legs? No, I don't, guys. I really don't. And this is maybe another shock for you guys. I think Leverkusen will beat them. I think Leverkusen will progress out of this game, will progress out of this tie, and they will be playing in the quarterfinals. Bayern Munich fans might not want to hear this, and maybe when the game kicks off, I'm proven wrong. But from everything I've seen from Bayern Munich this season, they leave me extremely underwhelmed and extremely concerned going forward in this competition. And that finally leaves us off with Feyenoord versus Inter. Now, Feyenoord are having a very weird season, right? Because obviously Arne Slot left the club, joined Liverpool. We know what he's doing. In the aftermath, Feyenoord, I believe, are 4th or 5th in the Eredivisie. Yeah, they're 4th place, 14 points off the top. They've just, in fact, hired Robin van Persie. And let me tell you this right now. Robin van Persie is one of my favorite players of all time. He played, 3 years at Man United. He's one of my favorite Man United players ever to wear the shirt. So Feyenoord, you have a fan in me. I want you guys to do really, really well. But they've been a weird team, right? And even against Milan, who they recently beat, of course, I didn't really think Feyenoord were that good. I almost felt, especially in the second leg, Milan threw it away more so than Feyenoord just completely outclassed them. Like, let's be real. Theo Hernandez threw the game for AC Milan, in my opinion. I think Milan were comfortable before that moment. They were comfortable before that red card, and they completely allowed Feyenoord back into the game. Now, to give Feyenoord credit, and I've watched them a few times. In fact, I was even at the game at the Etihad where Feyenoord came back from 3-0 down to draw 3-3. They have weapons. They have my Algerian brothers in Zerouki and Haj Moussa. Obviously, they've lost Santiago Jimenez, but they're still a team that have weapons. And Zerouki, I say that tongue-in-cheek. I know Zerouki is not the most popular guy for Feyenoord, in my opinion as well, too. He's not my favorite player for Algeria either, but give them both credit. Those are my guys. So Feyenoord have weapons, but unfortunately for them, they aren't playing the laughingstock of Milan this tie. They're playing the serious guys from Milan. They're playing the reigning Serie A champions. They're playing a team that just 2 years ago were in a Champions League final, and they're playing, in my opinion, one of the best coached teams in world football. When it comes to knockout football, guys, Simone Inzaghi, even since his Lazio days, is a master when it comes to this kind of stuff. And I think I can probably count on one hand, maybe two, the amount of times in his entire career at Inter, I can actually remember him getting out-coached by any manager. It happens that few and far beyond. It's a rare occurrence for it to happen. I think Inter are one of the sleeper teams in this Champions League. In fact, some people might even say they shouldn't even be a sleeper. They should be one of the favorites. I think any team that draws against them is immediately worried about the tactical matchup between their manager and Simone Inzaghi, because this is one of the best to do it, genuinely. I think Inter have another really deep run in them, and I think they will take care of business against Feyenoord. Again, Robin van Persie, you got my respect. But Inter, they are a scary, scary team when it comes to knockout football. And I think they will look at every single team in this competition, barring maybe Real Madrid, and think to themselves, yeah, we can take care of these guys. We can get shit done. So if we just go off my predictions, I think I'm going to edge it to Liverpool. I think they'll play Aston Villa. Now, between those two teams, we've seen them recently in the Prem, and Aston Villa gave them a really good game. But again, I would have to favor Liverpool to make the semi-final. Now, I think the other quarterfinal will be between Real Madrid and Arsenal. And I'm sorry, guys. As actually impressive as Arsenal have been, even with these injuries, right? They're actually completely blowing me away, because I thought they would have completely fell off at this point, and they're still keeping their head afloat. They're still keeping their head above water. I think Arsenal could genuinely go to the Santiago Bernabeu 100 times, and maybe they come away with a win one single time with all these injuries. I give Arsenal close to, maybe I give them 1% chance against Real Madrid. No disrespect to Arsenal, but I think this would be very, very one-sided. I have Real Madrid going through, and I have them playing against Liverpool. And I'm sorry, I think Real Madrid go to the final again, man. I think they do. Now, I know Liverpool took care of business at Anfield in the group stage, but I think that was a very different Real Madrid team. It was a very different Kylian Mbappe team, and it was about Vinicius Jr. as well, too. At that point, I think Real Madrid will have all their defensive options back, bar the likes of obviously Carvajal and Militao, who are out for the season. And I think at that point in the season, Real Madrid will be performing at their absolute apex, because that's just what they do. So I actually have Real Madrid going to the final again, man. It's boring. It's like, wow, really? Again, that's the obvious pick. But I don't see a team on this side of the bracket that can beat them. Now, on the other side, I have Barca playing against Lille. So I think Barca will go to the semifinal. And I have Leverkusen playing against Inter. That's three at the back managers between Alonso and Inzaghi. I have Inzaghi and Inter winning. So that would leave a Barca versus Inter semifinal. And this is really two completely different footballing philosophies. It's a team in Barcelona who love to attack, they love to score goals, and their mentality is just, let's outscore you. Well, obviously, that's how you win games, but you know what I mean. Whereas Inter have conceded 1 goal in the entire Champions League this year. They are defensive monsters. They are so tactically resolute. They're so defensively resolute. And they just operate as an unstoppable machine. Is this the year we finally get a classical Champions League final? You know what, guys? I can't predict this one. I can't predict. Inter versus Barca is so difficult to predict. But you know what? I'm going to go with Barcelona. Maybe this is the purist in me. This is me, the optimist in me, because I would love to see a classical Champions League. But I think Barca are going to the final this year. There you go. I'm not 100% sure when I say that, but my head is telling me Inter, my heart is telling me Barca, in terms of like, that's the fairy tale run we all want to see. And then we get a classical final where Barca this year have put belt to ass on Real Madrid. They have their number. But also Real Madrid in the Champions League final, they just don't lose those. That's where my prediction's going to end, guys. I can't go any further. I need to see more from these teams. But I think we're actually going to get a Classical final this year. It will be absolutely showtime. I just wish we could have got one in the Messi Ronaldo era. But that's what my heart's telling me. My head is maybe telling me Inter progress to the final. But I think everyone really wants to see a Barca versus Real final. And hopefully we get it. Ladies and gentlemen, let me know what you guys think about the draw. I think this draw is absolutely sensational. I wish I had like 6 TVs so I could watch all these games on at the same time. But it's going to be absolutely sensational. Let me know what you guys think is going to happen in each one of these ties. And let me know, what's your final prediction? Who's playing in this year's Champions League final in Munich, the road to Munich 2025? Can't wait to see it. And I can't wait to be along with you guys as we watch every single one of these games and react to it on this channel. As always, guys, like, share, subscribe. Check me out for the next video, and I'll see you next time. Peace.